Okay, today's topic is crime scene operations, and we have with us today is Chris Sailors from the Fulton County Sheriff's Department. He's the crime scene investigator, and I will turn it over to Chris at this time.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me in this morning. Jeff had contacted me probably a month and a half ago or a month ago and talked about some scene preservation as far as crime scenes. Sometimes you get involved in your calls when you go out, maybe a death investigation. I know a couple occasions we've had a homicide where medics get called, and just kind of some protocols, so to speak, just some real basic stuff. It's real, nothing too difficult, but just some things that help us and also help you when we get involved in this. So first I'm going to talk about crime scene operations, and then I'm going to cover some other things. It's real basic, and then we'll kind of go into some question and answers, or anytime you have a question, just say, hey, you know, and ask me. So crime scene operations, Ed Haynes and myself. Ed's the crime scene tech for the city of Rochester. And we went through crime scene school together here about 4 or 5 years ago. We go through the same training state police go through. It's actually, the class is down at the Law Enforcement Academy, and it's actually put on by the state police in conjunction with the law enforcement personnel, academy personnel down there. We go through a month-long training and cover everything from A to Z. So from that standpoint, Ed and I kind of put this together here a couple of years ago. I think I come in and talk to you guys at that point in time. And there's been a few new faces that's come in, so Jeff thought maybe we'd go over this again. But anyway, a lot of times Ed covers for me. If I'm on vacation, I'll cover for Ed if he's on vacation. A lot of times if we have a major crime scene, we'll work together, and a lot of times we'll end up with state police coming in too. So, crime scene is a source of evidence or intelligence. David Bellamy, quote he made back in 2001. He's a crime scene tech or crime scene investigator. Definition of a crime scene is a location where an illegal act took place and comprises of an area from which most of the physical evidence is retrieved by trained law enforcement personnel or CSIs, and in rare circumstances of forensic scientists. If we had a really difficult crime scene, we may sometimes call the lab people to come in and help us with this. But that's kind of the real definition of what a crime scene is. And we'll get more into that here in a minute. Evidence preservation. Whenever you have a suspected crime scene, the biggest thing you want to do is preserve as much of the evidence as possible. And that's just protecting the scene. So a lot of times, just like I was talking with Dan here a little while ago, they had a fire over in Kewanna, and it was kind of suspicious, so we tried to preserve the crime scene and protect that as much as possible. Evidence, basically there's 3 factors that we look at. Anything that can connect a victim to a suspect to a victim, or a suspect to the crime scene. Okay, those are the 3 key points. If you don't have those, I mean, if you had like for an example, a homicide, okay, or a suspected homicide, or death investigation you get into. The suspect may not be there, but you have a victim. We want to secure that crime scene and preserve that evidence. That way, when we go into the investigation, if we get information or through the course of our investigation we have a suspect, we can tie that suspect to that victim, obviously, or the suspect to the crime scene. Yeah, we saw him leaving, you know, witness, we saw him leaving that area or whatever. Okay, we're going to question him. We get into the investigation, we find out that, yeah, I was there. Yeah, you know, whatever, as the investigation proceeds. So when we have the physical evidence there, then we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because when you get into court, I'll digress here a little bit. When you get into court, it's not what we know, it's what we can prove. And in a criminal case, you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. So we want to make sure it's not circumstantial evidence. We have to prove, yes, we can place him here based on the physical evidence. Fundamental principle of crime scene investigation. It is impossible to be on a crime scene without leaving your evidence yourself, as leaving evidence of yourself on the scene or taking evidence with you. There's a principle, and it's called the Locard principle. And what that states is that if you walk in to a crime scene, okay, as you walk in there, you may have something on your feet, you may touch something, what have you, you may leave something there, and we have to account for that. Okay, so as medics, when you go in there, if you leave something in there, we're going to sit there and go, was that left by the suspect? Was it something that the victim had already, or was it something that you guys brought in? So we have to account for that. Okay, and it's called the Locard exchange principle. Also, as you leave, you may walk through, like one scene I can remember, a large amount of blood. Okay. You may inadvertently step into that and walk out, and all of a sudden we have this bloody footprint. Okay, whose footprint is that? Is it the medics? Is it the suspects? You know, so we have to account for that. So just be cognizant of that. Locard's exchange principle. He was Dr. Edmund Locard. He was the one that developed this principle that every contact leaves a trace. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it's like I said, it could be a fiber off your clothing. You might brush up against something. It could be handprint, fingerprint, whatever. When we go into a crime scene, we have to basically, like I said before, have to account for that and try to figure out who that belongs to. Dr. Locard, he was the first modern day crime lab, probably crime scene investigator. He had was on the police department in Lyons, France in 1910. He also developed the fingerprint identification. It had been, to some extent, already developed, but he's the one that really started using that in modern day as far as identification and tying that to crime scenes and what we use today. So, quotation, wherever he steps, whatever he touches, whatever he leaves, even without consciousness, will serve as a silent witness against him. Not only his fingerprints or footprints, but his hair, fibers from his clothing, the glass he breaks, the tool mark he leaves, the paint that he scratches, the blood or semen he deposits or collects, all these and more bear witness against him. That was a quote from him, which continues, this is evidence that does not forget, it is not confused by the excitement of the moment, and it's not absent because human witnesses are. The factual evidence, physical evidence cannot be wrong, it cannot prejudice itself, it cannot be wholly absent. Only human failure is to find it, study it, and understand it, and diminish its value. And this guy was a crime scene investigator in New York, and that was back in 1953. Kind of listen to that. I mean, he's kind of covering the whole gamut of a crime scene. It's kind of what I described. When you go in there, you're going to leave something of yourself, and when you leave, you're going to take something of yourself. And the thing about it is, again, we have to try to find out what, why, where. You know, we ask all those questions why it's there. So, evidence. Evidence could be any of these things. Fingerprints, bite marks. You know, there's a lot of instances where you guys may be involved on a call where you have a battery. You know, somebody's severely injured. You might have bite marks on the subject. You might have broken fingernails. You may have obviously blood and body fluids. You might have some of these other things that might be in that crime scene where you're working, and we'll get into that more in a minute. Blood spatter. It's not splatter, it's spatter. Okay. Dean Marks works with the state police. Sergeant Marks, he's probably the foremost authority, and we're lucky to have him in our district. We've called him on several occasions, since I've been involved, he's come up and helped me with some cases where you might have cast off or you have blood spatter on a wall, and he can do the interpretation on that and help, say, position where the body was at when it first happened, or the subject might have been there. And he's probably as close to an expert as far as testifying in court as anybody in the state of Indiana right now. So that's kind of his specialty. Tool marks, fracture matches, hair, fibers, paint, glass. Really probably not going to concern you too much at this point, but we'll deal more with some of the other things. Again, crime scenes, location where the criminal act was committed. If it was in this room, you may have a whole house, or say the whole station could be considered a crime scene. Generally, wherever the crime occurred, that's going to be the primary scene, but that scene can expand, as we all know. It's been involved in some investigations and whatnot. All entry and exit routes from the area where the crime scene was committed. Say there was something that happened here. You've got two entrances and exits. Depending on where you come in, you might just kind of something to keep in mind. If you have stuff right here at this entrance when you come in, and I know you guys, your primary concern is patient care, which it should be. But I guess what we're asking as investigators is that you just be a little more aware of, if there's a whole big pool of blood right there in front of the door, step around if you can, instead of stepping through it type thing. So, again, as far as evidence preservation, patient care is first priority of all responding agencies, whether it's fire department, whether it's us, whether it's you guys. Sometimes you guys beat us to the scene, sometimes we beat you to the scene. We get called first and oh crap, we need medics. Sometimes the fire department gets there before we do, and next thing you know, they're calling us and you at the same time. So, but first and foremost, if you have a victim there and they need aid rendered, they're the first priority. The evidence part is secondary at that point. What I'm going to get into next is covering a little bit more about documentation, what you guys may observe. And again, realizing that patient care is first. Sometimes you don't always know or need to say, okay, I need to make sure that I notice this or notice this. If you do, that's great. Just make a mental note of it, what have you. But patient care is first priority. Here's just a picture of a crime scene threw in there, kind of give you an idea sometimes what you encounter. Again, obviously you can see you have a victim here on the floor, a wheelchair, paper scattered around. To be quite honest, don't know what happened here, but it's something you might encounter, you might see typically. I mean, this could be a death investigation at this point, as an example. This next picture is pretty obvious what happened. Guy shot in the back, blood spatter. So obviously, if you see that, and one of you might go up and take a pulse. Yeah, he's gone. Okay, time to back out and call us. The initial approach, again, the less the better. I mean, if you have a situation where you guys get there and obviously you have a victim lying on the floor, like the previous picture, minimum amount of equipment necessary to do what you need to do, the minimal amount of contact required. Situation, like I said, the previous picture, okay, you got a gunshot, the guy slumped over the table. Okay, somebody go up, check the pulse. If he's still breathing and going on, I mean, then at that point, you guys need to do what you need to do. Render aid, but if you determine that he's deceased, okay, I would back out and call law enforcement at that point, so.